I put together a list of some of the smartest people in history. The kind of minds that changed the world with their ideas. People whose intelligence shaped the future. But in this video, we are going to look for something dumb they did. Now, this is not about discrediting them or making fun of their achievements. Not at all. The point is to show that even the most brilliant minds made mistakes. Some small and some surprisingly big. So maybe the next time you mess up, you'll go a little easier on yourself. Isaac Newton is the man who decoded the world. Gravity, motion, light, calculus. His mind shaped the foundation of modern science. He was so smart, he was casually solving groundbreaking problems that had confused scientists for years, without even realizing how significant they were. In the 1060s, the motion of the planets puzzled everyone. Kepler had described how they moved, tracing elegant ellipses around the sun, but no one knew why. The force behind it remained a mystery. Years later, the question still lingered in the minds of astronomers. One of them, Edmund Halley, set out to find answers. He traveled to Cambridge to speak with Isaac Newton, already known for his brilliance, but living in relative isolation. When Halley brought up the problem, Newton responded without hesitation. He already knew the answer. Not just the shape of the orbit, but the reason behind it. A force that pulled the planet to the sun, growing weaker with distance. He said that he had worked it out long ago, but when he searched for the paper where he had written it down, it was gone. He had lost it. Halley was astonished. Newton had casually solved the question that baffled the world and hadn't realized the significance. Encouraged by Halley's reaction, Newton redid the calculations and expanded on them. But despite his unmatched intellect, Newton spent an astonishing amount of his life chasing something that even in his own time was wildly seen as nonsense: alchemy. While the scientific community around him was moving forward, favoring careful observations, mathematical reasoning, and empirical evidence, Newton locked himself away, obsessing over a field already being recognized as a pseudo-science. He devoted decades to alchemical experiments, copying cryptic manuscripts, mixing strange substances, and searching for the legendary Philosopher's Stone, a mythical substance that could supposedly turn lead into gold. This obsession wasn't a brief detour. In fact, Newton wrote more about alchemy than he did about physics. He filled thousands of pages with notes and translations of obscure texts, trying to uncover what he believed were hidden natural laws buried beneath symbolic language. All this while chemistry was beginning to emerge as a real science, built on repeatable experiments and clear results. Everything alchemy wasn't. He also studied the Bible obsessively. He believed that the church had become corrupted and that true Christianity had been lost. His private writings were full of ideas that, at the time, could have been labeled heresy and possibly gotten him in serious trouble. To protect himself, and perhaps out of perfectionism, Newton kept these writings hidden. Some he burned and some he erased. Others he refused to publish, fearing they were either dangerous, misunderstood, or unfinished. In his pursuit of these secrets, he may have stumbled upon ideas far ahead of his time and destroyed them without even realizing what he had. We will never know how much knowledge he destroyed, how many discoveries overlooked, or how far ahead he truly was. He spent decades chasing myths, all while sitting on ideas that could have changed the future. But while wasting decades on pseudoscience and possibly burning important discoveries is arguably foolish, Newton's stupidest decision was probably how he handled the first major economic bubble in history. Around the year 1711, Newton got involved in the stock market. Britain had just created the South Sea Company. Basically, it was supposed to help the government pay off debts. They offered shares to the public, people would buy them, and the money would go to the government. Newton, being smart with numbers, bought some shares. And lucky for him, the price of the stock shot up nearly 10 times higher. So he sold and he made the equivalent of over $1 million in today's money. A huge win. But then the stock kept going up. And that's when the fear of missing out kicked in. Newton started doubting himself. Why did I sell so early? I should have waited. I could have made way more. So what did he do? He went back in. Hard. He took 3/4 of everything he owned and bought more shares. And then the bubble popped, the company collapsed, and Newton lost almost everything. This was one of the first big economical crashes in history, the South Sea Bubble, and one of its victims was one of humanity's greatest minds. It's hard to explain how smart Einstein was if you don't understand physics. He didn't just change what we think, he changed how we think. He solved problems no one else had even realized were problems, and he predicted things decades before we could test them. But as smart as he was, his genius didn't spill over into his personal life. Take for example his crumbling marriage to Mileva Maric. By 1914, their relationship was falling apart. But instead of fixing it or ending it altogether, Einstein gave Mileva a list of conditions she had to agree to if she wanted to stay under the same roof for the sake of the children. Some of these conditions included: you will stop talking to me if I ask you. You will not expect any affection from me. Later, he started having affairs, including one with his own cousin, whom he eventually married. He also had a strained relationship with his sons. At one point, he wrote to his eldest, Hans Albert, "You are a lazy, deceitful boy. I am not writing to you anymore." It seems like he was trying to apply the same structured and rigid thinking from his scientific work to his personal relationships, which actually require flexibility and emotional openness. And it shows how far behind his emotional intelligence was compared to his scientific IQ. But Einstein's misjudgments weren't limited to his family. He also made a ton of bad decisions in his public life. In one of his most bizarre moments, Einstein signed a petition defending Nathan Leopold, a young man who, along with his partner, had kidnapped and murdered a child just to see if they could get away with it. It was the so-called perfect crime. Einstein, along with other intellectuals, argued for Leopold's life to be spared, calling him a product of circumstances. While he likely saw it as a stand against the death penalty, the timing and optics were disastrous. The public was outraged. Even many of Einstein's friends were confused by his choice to get involved in such a grotesque case. Einstein was also very passionate about sailing. It was one of his favorite hobbies, but he was absolutely terrible at it. He refused to learn how to swim, which is a pretty stupid decision if you are going to spend a lot of time on the water. He also refused to wear a life jacket, and on top of that, he didn't believe in checking the weather forecast. So he basically took every dumb risk a person could possibly take when sailing. No swimming skills, no life jacket, and no weather precautions. His careless demeanor led to the inevitable. His boat capsized after he sailed straight into a violent storm, and he had to be rescued by a passing yacht. Thomas Edison was a genius inventor and one of the leaders of the Industrial Revolution. He held over 1,000 patents, including one for the light bulb, which changed the way the entire world lives. Edison had a vision of creating a future powered by electricity, and he was building a power empire using what's called DC, direct current. One day, one of his best workers at the company, a young engineer named Nikola Tesla, came to him with a new idea. Tesla realized that Edison's DC system had major flaws, and he proposed an alternative, AC, or alternating current. AC could travel long distances with very little power loss, making it perfect for widespread electrification. Edison rejected the idea. This led to a falling out with one of his most talented employees, who would eventually team up with a wealthy entrepreneur willing to take a chance on Tesla's vision for AC. What followed was a long and bitter conflict between Edison and Tesla, the so-called War of Current. Edison did everything he could to prove that AC was dangerous and unfit for public use, while AC kept proving itself as the superior electrical system. Edison launched a public campaign to discredit AC. He staged public executions of animals, dogs, horses, and even elephants using AC to demonstrate how deadly it could be. He even helped invent the electric chair powered by AC just to associate Tesla's current with death and fear. But no matter how hard he tried, Tesla and AC kept winning. In the end, Edison didn't stop AC's progress. The only thing he damaged was his own public image. The thing is, I'm not saying that the stupidest thing about Edison was simply not realizing that AC was better than DC. The truly stupid part is this. Even though Edison probably believed DC was the better option at first and genuinely believed AC was dangerous, he almost certainly realized at some point that AC was actually the superior system. But he never admitted it. Instead, he kept doubling down. He stayed stubborn, refusing to back down, even though he likely knew deep down that he was wrong. His ego didn't just hurt him financially, it also permanently damaged his reputation and left a major stain on his legacy. And that, in my opinion, is the truly stupid thing about Edison. Even though Nikola Tesla and the alternating current were the winners of the electricity war, Tesla's personal life was not nearly as successful. Everyone who met him, even those without any scientific knowledge, could immediately tell he was a genius. He was a visionary, and he often made the right decisions at the right moment. But sadly, the decisions he made in his personal life were not as bright. He lived a sad, lonely, and often miserable life. Partly because of circumstances, yes, but also because of a series of very dumb decisions. Tesla never married. He claimed that his celibacy was essential to his creativity. He believed that romantic relationships would interfere with his mental focus. Over time, this self-imposed emotional distance became a defining feature of his life. His isolation was made worse by his intense and often compulsive behaviors. Tesla was famously obsessive, compulsive, fixated on cleanliness, symmetry, and numbers. He reportedly refused to stay in a hotel room unless the number was divisible by 3. He insisted on using exactly 18 napkins to clean his utensils before every meal. These quirks, while seemingly harmless, were a sign of a deeper psychological strain. They built walls between him and the others, reinforcing his loneliness. In his later years, Tesla developed an emotional attachment to pigeons, especially one white pigeon that he claimed visited him regularly. He said he loved this bird as he would love a person, and that her presence brought him peace in a world that had otherwise shut him out. Some may see this as eccentric or even sad, but it shows just how starved for connection Tesla really was. The brilliant mind Tesla was blessed with could have easily offered him a decent life, but his strange, self-imposed rules led him to a lonely existence. By the end of his life, he was living alone in a New York hotel room, rarely visited and mostly forgotten. And the man who once envisioned a connected world through wireless transmission had become increasingly disconnected from the one around him. Unlike the other big brains in this list, Steve Jobs was born in a modern, connected world, a time when access to information was easier than ever. So if the others on this list could maybe blame some of their bad decisions on the myths or false beliefs of their time, Jobs doesn't really have that excuse. And yet, he still made some very stupid decisions in his life. One of the strangest was his refusal to shower. Jobs became obsessed with extreme veganism. He believed that eating only fruits would detox his body, eliminate the need for a deodorant, and even make showering unnecessary. At Atari, where he worked before founding Apple, his hygiene was so bad that the company placed him on the night shift, just to keep him away from other employees. But these habits didn't stop at hygiene. They affected how he approached life in general. In 2003, Jobs was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. It was highly treatable, especially in its early stages. But instead of choosing immediate medical intervention, Steve Jobs delayed treatment for 9 critical months, relying instead on strict diets, juicing, and plant-based remedies. By the time he agreed to surgery, it was too late. Steve Jobs had access to the best doctors, the best treatments, and more resources than almost anyone on the planet. But he ignored science when it mattered most. Jobs helped change the world with his vision for technology, but he may have shortened his time in it by refusing to trust the science that could have saved him. Abbas Ibn Firnas was a brilliant 19th century inventor and a scholar from Al-Andalus. He had a mind full of curiosity and knowledge that stretched across disciplines: astronomy, engineering, medicine, poetry, and even glassmaking. He was centuries ahead of his time, introducing new ways of measuring time, studying the stars with remarkable precision, and laying the groundwork for scientific thinking across both Europe and the Islamic world. But for most people, that's not what he's remembered for. Driven by his fascination for nature and mechanics, Ibn Firnas began studying how birds fly. His curiosity wasn't just poetic, it was scientific. He carefully observed wing shapes, air resistance, and motion, and used all that knowledge to design a flying machine. Around the year 875, at nearly 70 years old, he built the machine, a bamboo frame covered with silk cloth and eagle feathers. To test it, he climbed the hills of Jabal al-Ras, in what's now Yemen, and jumped. And he actually glided, not for long, but long enough to be considered the first recorded human to attempt controlled flight. But then he crash landed. He survived, but he hurt his back and likely broke his nose. Why? Because he spent so much time engineering the flight, he forgot to design a way to land. And that's what most people remember. In many Arab countries, his story was told more like a joke. Just a weird guy who strapped on wings and face planted off a cliff. A funny little historical mishap. That was the whole story. No one mentioned the rest. That he wasn't just a dreamer, but a legitimate inventor. Someone who made real contributions to science and technology. Most people still only know him for that one silly failure. So unlike most people in this video, who are remembered for their brilliant minds, despite the dumb mistakes they made, Abbas Ibn Firnas is remembered almost only for his dumb mistake, which honestly isn't even that bad compared to some of the others on the list. And that's kinda sad. Imagine spending your whole life trying to move humanity forward, to make the world a better place, only for humanity to remember you as the guy who forgot about the landing. But thankfully, that's starting to change. Thanks to the internet and growing awareness, more and more people are realizing that he wasn't just a guy who crash landed. He was the first to try flying. A scientist, a visionary, a true inventor. And it's time we remember him that way. Napoleon Bonaparte is a name that still echoes with power. The man was a military genius, a master of strategy, and a self-made emperor who reshaped the entire map of Europe. He was the kind of guy who could walk into a room full of kings and make them nervous. He read endlessly, planned obsessively, and rarely lost. But he made one massive, freezing mistake. In 1812, Napoleon decided to invade Russia, and he did it right before winter. Now let's pause here. Invading Russia in winter is one of the most famously horrible ideas in all of history. Ask the Swedes, ask Hitler, ask literally anyone who ever looked at a globe, this is a very bad idea. But somehow, Napoleon, the man who planned every battle down to the angle of the sun, thought that he could outsmart the Russian snow. So he brought the largest army Europe had ever seen. Over 600,000 soldiers from across the continent. His plan? March in, take Moscow Moscow and take the easy win. Except it wasn't. The Russians didn't play along. They didn't fight. They ran, burning their own cities and farms behind them. Napoleon's army marched deeper into Russia, chasing shadows, while the supply lines stretched thinner and thinner. And then came the cold. The army had no proper winter clothing, no reliable food supplies, horses were collapsing in the snow, and cannons were abandoned in icy rivers. The soldiers were eating their own belts to survive. By the time they reached Moscow, the city was on fire, literally burned by the Russians themselves. There was nothing to conquer and no shelter to hide from the storm. And that's when the real nightmare started. Temperatures dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius, disease started to spread, and wolves started to follow the troops, eating them alive. By the time Napoleon limped back to France, more than 500,000 of his soldiers were dead. So yes, Napoleon was a genius, but invading Russia in the winter, that wasn't genius. That was just cold, hard stupidity. Marie Curie is one of the most iconic scientists in history. The first woman to win a Nobel Prize and the only person, man or woman, to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences, physics and chemistry. She discovered radium and polonium and helped change modern medicine and physics forever. She was brilliant, determined, but there is one thing she didn't understand. Something no one fully understood at the time, but looking back, it feels so obvious it almost hurts. Marie Curie didn't know that radiation was killing her. In her lab, she handled glowing radioactive materials with her bare hand. She carried test tubes of radium around her neck and she slept with a vial of radioactive salt inside her bed because she found the glow comforting. Her notes are to this day still too radioactive to safely touch without protection. Mary didn't realize she was slowly being poisoned by the thing she had dedicated her life to. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Her health started to decline and she suffered from chronic illnesses, and eventually she died from aplastic anemia, a condition linked to prolonged radiation exposure. And that's how her greatest discovery was also the thing that took her life. It's already really hard to be great at one thing. Most people spend their entire lives trying to get really good at one single thing. But then, there are people who are so good at so many things, it's honestly kind of annoying. And there is no better example of that than Leonardo da Vinci. He was a painter, a sculptor, an architect, an engineer, a scientist, a musician, an inventor. He studied astronomy, flight, optics, geology, hydraulics. He painted the Mona Lisa, and he sketched out flying machines 400 years before airplanes. He dissected corpses to understand the human body for science, but also so he could make his art more accurate. He was, without a question, one of the most brilliant minds in all of history. But he was also, without a question, a massive procrastinator. Leonardo da Vinci was notorious in his lifetime for his inability to complete projects. He would accept commissions for some grand undertaking and then never get beyond the start. As a government official in Florence once said about him, he made a very small beginning of every large thing. His problem wasn't talent, it was focus. Da Vinci was endlessly curious. He would start painting, then stop to study light reflection. He'd begin a sculpture, then get distracted by bird flight patterns or water hydraulics. He obsessed over every little detail, sometimes to the point of complete paralysis. Even Pope Leo X noticed, where he saw Leonardo spending days trying to perfect a new formula for varnish instead of, painting. The Pope reportedly said, "This man will never do anything, for he begins by thinking about the end before the beginning of his work." The Mona Lisa took him 16 years, and even then, he never truly finished it. He just kept tweaking it. He spent 17 years designing what would have been the largest bronze horse statue in the world, studied horse motion, made dozens of models, and then never even started the statue. And the bronze got melted down for war weapons. He imagined helicopters, submarines, tanks, all hundreds of years ahead of his time, but none of them were ever made. He left behind thousands of pages of notes and blueprints. Many were brilliant, most were unfinished.